right, and we're live, and here we go. All right. Welcome to the podcast. I am joined by Dr. Norman Miller. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Thanks for coming. Dr. Norman Miller is has been an economics professor for 52 years. He specializes in international finance and open economy macroeconomics, as well as macro monetary economics. He has taught at numerous universities around the country. Taught at the Carnegie Mellon University, and there was another one that you mentioned.
I'm briefly at University of Michigan.
University of Michigan, and
I worked for the government 1 year. I was a full-time consultant to the U.S. Treasury Department under Nixon administration.
That's right, yeah. And he's written, edited, and co-authored several books and countless scholarly articles. So, got that knowledge. So, yeah. So, economics tends to be a topic that most people tend to either lack interest in, unfortunately, because it affects so many of us in every country, but also something that people have a very hard time understanding. So, what got you interested in economics initially? Like, what got you into it?
Oh, well, I started out as an engineering student at Cornell University.
Engineering.
I had a full scholarship there, and after a year and a half, I decided I didn't want to be an engineer. And I had to give up my scholarship, and I couldn't afford to pay to go there.
So after 1 year, you decided that you didn't want to do engineering. What made you decide not to do engineering?
It was actually a year and a half before I decided. I'm not sure. It just seemed it wasn't alive and boring and relevant. And then I bumped around. And I was a phys ed major for one semester. I was a math major for one semester. I was a business major for one semester. And second semester, junior year, I decided I didn't know what I wanted to do. I went around to each department and said, can I major in your subject and graduate in a year and a half? Because my parents were old-fashioned. They said after 4 years of college, you're on your own. And economics professor was hard up. He said, yeah, you can take principles, intermediate, and advanced all at the same time. I knew nothing about economics, and that's what made me become an economics major.
Wow. So, okay, so is it safe to say that you initially kind of had no genuine interest in it, but then because it allowed you to efficiently handle your financial and living situation, as well as not have troubles with being supported or not being supported, that out of that sort of random arrangement came 52 years of professional interest.
I loved it when I started taking the courses. I absolutely loved it. It was challenging enough. It's analytical, a lot of it, and math. Yeah. It's relevant. It's relevant for everything we do as business people, as consumers, and as workers. It's relevant. Yeah. And it's in the news. Yeah. The newspapers are full of macroeconomics.
Yeah, absolutely. What boggles my mind is that, I mean, I feel like I could ask this of, and this question I think reaches and touches many people of various expertise. Thanks. But so in your mind, the general public, I mean, obviously the general public has nowhere near the level of knowledge about economics, the dynamics, the forces that flow and affect all of our lives in the economy. So do you feel like if everybody knew a little bit more about economics than currently they do, that it would improve the benefits of voting itself?
Sure, of course. First of all, you're right. Most people don't know much economics, but I give you a fact. Allegedly, about 1 million students in college take an economics course every semester. And that's been for 30 or 40 years. So we ought to have 30 or 40 million, at least, adults who know something about economics. But most people, I think, burn their economics book right after they're finished with it. Like they had to take economics, and they hated it, and they got out of it, and they said that's all. And so, maybe they forgot most of it.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Like politicians say things to get votes that are just downright deceptive, if not outright lies, and people don't realize that.
So when the professors say things that you're sitting there and you're like, I know my shit, and what you just said is incorrect or inaccurate, do you is that how it happens? Like, you're watching them and then you notice?
Yes, I'll give you, for example, I've heard several politicians in my lifetime say, I'm all for international trade provided that nobody gets hurt. That's like saying I'm all for a March Madness basketball tournament provided nobody loses. Or I'm all for swimming provided nobody gets wet. You understand? It's like nonsense.
Yeah, I see. Let's make some omelets, but I don't want anybody breaking any eggs.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, yeah, man. I feel like much of what politicians and I suppose other folks in media, much of what they say when they're being deceptive is just basically playing on the ignorance of the public. Would you agree?
Yes, and by the way, I'm not sure that the politicians even know they're being deceptive.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, for example, in the 1950s and 60s, when I was a very high school boy, college boy, graduate student, people were saying women should stay at home because every job a woman has is one less job for a man. Labor unions did that, but politicians, a lot of people said that. Well, you know what? That seems like it's true, right?
Yeah.
Now we say something equivalent. Every job a Mexican has is one less job for an American. But let's go back to the women. Women produce 40% of the output in this country. If we had them all at home, maybe we'd have better families, maybe we'd be happier, okay? But in terms of the output would be 40% lower, and our standard of living would be 40% lower. And if you want to figure out what that means to you, just figure out your income and then take 60% of that. That's what you would have if women stay home instead of working. And so, those kinds of statements sound true, and maybe the politician believes them.
Yeah.
But they're microeconomics. One woman, one man, one Mexican, one American.
Yeah.
And macroeconomics, how the economy works, is completely different. And I think nobody fully understand how the macro economy works. Like
micro meaning in between individuals, and macro being just
the whole thing,
masses.
Everything. Yeah, everything.
Yeah. Wow. And so, and then you specialize in macro. So
yeah,
I see. Yeah. I can't imagine the difficulty of like seeing all the forces interacting and trying to gauge what's going to happen next. Like, for instance, I'm curious if in your mind, because this has been talked about recently, that we're going to have another 2008, another one of those coming at some point soon.
A near catastrophe. Let's see. It is possible. Of course, anything's possible.
Mm-hmm. Could you attach a percentage on that?
No.
Okay.
But much greater than zero. And it depends on what you mean. In the next year? No. In the next 100 years? Maybe. I don't know. That's too long.
I see. And I don't know how comfortable you are making predictions, but what do you think would be like the first thing to be affected if that happened again?
I don't want to make predictions like that. I mean, it would be catastrophic.
Yeah.
If it happened tomorrow, I would lose my job.
Oh, I see.
And half the students would get pulled out of school.
Yeah.
And it would just be catastrophic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's hope it doesn't happen in our lifetimes.
Yes, let's hope. And let's hope that whatever we do in this lifetime, in our lifetimes, currently, that we set up the future generations to not have to deal with that. But I mean, from the looks of it, it just looks like the more time we give it, the more likely it's going to happen. But it's just my mind speculating. I don't know if there's any truth to this.
I want to go off on it a little bit, okay?
Yeah.
We've learned a lot since the Great Depression of the 1930s, okay? Like the government unwittingly did a lot of wrong things and helped make it a Great Depression. And we've learned from that. We would be in the middle of Great Depression number 2 now if the government had done all the stupid things in 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 that they did in the early 1930s. They did the right things more or less this time around. And so it becomes progressively less likely that we'll have a Great Depression because we've learned from the past. But that doesn't mean it won't happen.
I see. That makes me think of the concept of the butterfly effect. So things done, in year X will have significant impacts on everything or select amount of things 20, 60, 100 years from then, it seems.
Well, perhaps, yes.
Yeah. Which just seems like a giant beast of a system to try to handle, which makes me think that it's like, is it even logical of us to think that one person, meaning a president, and I know they have like people that they employ and utilize experts to figure these things out and make decisions based on their expertise, but it seems like one person, one head on top of this pyramid of the political system we got. It just makes no sense to have one person controlling everything or making decisions in this such a significant way. Do you think that do you see any relevance or value in the idea of having like a small group of scientifically knowledgeable people running the country instead of a president?
Well, from politics, that point of view, I can't speak. Okay. With regard to economics, we do have the Federal Reserve, and they have some really good economists, and the people on top are mostly good economists, and they have a great influence. Okay.
Their actions are having great influence on the people.
Great influence on the economy. Maybe you recall Trump has been critical the last 6 months of the Federal Reserve raising interest rates. And they were raising interest rates because they are afraid that inflation is going to heat up. And with higher interest rates, people borrow less to buy cars and houses and things like that. So we have less inflation. And Trump was worried that the higher interest rates would stop this economic expansion that we're having. And the Federal Reserve is independent of Congress or the president. So we do have that. And we have the president who has much power, as you know. And Trump is maybe pushing the envelope too far. And then we have Congress too, but Congress usually acts very, very slowly and with political motives.
Political motives?
Yeah. For example, in 2007 and 8, the economy crashed. And, it didn't go down that much, but we were on the edge of crashing to a Great Depression. And among other things, Congress appropriated hundreds of billions of dollars of extra spending to help the economy create jobs. And from what I've read, they argued forever, not really, literally forever, where are we going to spend this money? Who's going to get it? You understand? Politically, you want money spent in, let's build a bridge in my hometown or where I live, okay, things like that. And a lot of the money did not come on board soon enough to save the economy. It helped the economy, but it did not save the economy because of politicians arguing exactly the details.
Now, do you think that politicians arguing is what causes the slowness of Congress, or is Congress do they just have a system, a process that's just inherently slower? Again,
I can't speak with any expertise about political science and things like that. From what I know, just reading papers all my life,
I see.
Every member of Congress wants to act in a way that helps his constituents. I mean, they elected him, and he owes it to them.
Right.
And therefore, it's only natural that they would argue and debate. But when it's like if we were on a Titanic and we knew it was sinking, and we had enough lifeboats to save everybody. Wouldn't it be silly if we argued as to who gets in first? And then maybe people drown because we didn't have time for everybody to get in.
That's really a really good analogy.
But the Federal Reserve can act within a day or two.
Okay.
And the president can do things within a day or two also.
That's that That's interesting because that gives way for a lot of knee-jerk reactions, I suppose. But well, the next question would have been more for a political science major. I was just going to ask, like, or a political science person, like how much power do they have to veto the president's decisions? But I don't know if you.
I think they need a 2/3 vote anytime to veto a presidential decision, and they just tried it. You know, the House and the Senate both voted against Trump's national emergency so he could build his wall.
I see.
But he vetoed it.
Oh, okay.
Well, in the House of Representatives, I think this week, tried to override his veto. They need 2/3 vote. They didn't get 2/3 vote. They didn't even come close. And even if they had, the Senate would never do that because the Senate is dominated by Republicans.
Okay, I see. Man, it's just such a complex system. You know, and what bothers me, this is more on a philosophical and social, you know, sociological area, but it does bother me how much confidence people speak with about our economic problems. You know, people are like, I support this candidate or I support this candidate because, you know, he's going to do this or she's going to do that, and it's like, do you have the expertise to even evaluate that package or that idea is bad or good? Like, and you're so like, I don't mind people having opinions. I like, you know, I like debating and all this, and I like talking about it in discussions, but overconfidence seems so reckless to me. And the general public seems to have that, especially because we're polarized to have political stances. Everyone's either you have a political stance or you have no room to argue and you're not going to argue. And it almost becomes, in today's day and age, especially because of the internet and how much we glorify intellectualism, how much we glorify anyone who wins an argument. It's like winning an argument is more important, it seems, than it is to, you know, in the eye of the public, the charisma boosted after you win an argument, the ego boost people seem to get, and after they win an argument, it seems like it's more of a sports show. It's more of a sports game to people to have discussions about politics or the economy or about the industry than it is to actually figure things out together by putting our heads together on it, because we all have the human flaw. We all have this issue of just being ignorant about various facts. You know, even the experts are not fully aware of all the facts. So I wish people would incorporate this awareness of our ignorance.
Yeah, and by the way, I think people believe the economic theory that suits their prejudices about everything else in life. And macroeconomics is very young. Now, Adam Smith in 1776 is credited with the first economics book. Okay,
77.
1776, and he did have some macroeconomics in there, but he had a lot of microeconomics too. In 1890, an English economist named Alfred Marshall was the first book that I know of that has supply and demand in it. Yeah, and if you think about, you know, the Greeks figured out all the algebra that we know and all the geometry that we know more than 2,000 years ago. And it took the human race until 1890 to actually put supply and demand together. People had argued for decades what causes prices to be high or low. And somebody would talk, and they were talking about supply. And somebody else would say no, and they were talking about demand.
Wow.
Well, to my knowledge, there was no book called macroeconomics and no course in college called macroeconomics until the middle of the Great Depression. So macroeconomic theory, as we think of it now, with the reservation that Adam Smith did have some good ideas about macroeconomics, okay, is really, really new. And I think we don't really understand it, okay?
Yeah.
And you know, the proof of that is that we have schools of thought, just like in philosophy or religion, right?
True.
And they argue forever. And if you have schools of thought, it must not, only one could be true at most, right? Okay. And maybe none of them are.
That's so true.
That's why when things work out in the economy, I like to think of it as economic magic because we don't really understand it. And when things fall apart, I think it's economic black magic.
are you attributing to both regular magic and black magic? Are you attributing intentional actions?
No.
No.
I'm doing this. Throughout history, when we humans did not understand something, we very often called it magic. Something that happened, and we called it magic, okay? And when something bad happened, black magic or the gods or, or the devil or whatever. Yeah. And what happened in 2007, 2008, we understand to a certain extent, but some really good scholars have said, gee, how could that have almost brought the whole world economy down? Like we don't really understand.
Even now, we don't understand.
Even now. And let's see, I'll give you a perspective. I started studying economics. I had my PhD more than 50 years, and every economics book that I've read for 50 years, including before that when I was a student, gives you the impression that we almost have it all figured out. No, maybe not quite. Okay. And and then 40 years later, 50 years later, well, some of that was wrong, but now we do have it almost figured out, and I suspect we don't. Okay, I really suspect like we're on the right track, but we're not there at all. That's what I think.
Yeah, that intuitively makes sense to me. Just because of the whole like human ignorance of about the things we unknow, the things we don't know, and the unknown. That the gap in our knowledge. Meaning like, we're 95% there. That 5%, we'll get to it here real soon. And then 95%, that 5% proves to be like 50%. And then it proves to be another 50%. And we realize that the whole percentage system is based on things that we haven't accounted for. So.
Yeah, by the way, I'm not picking on economists or economics.
I didn't sound like that.
I don't know if you know the story about why President George Washington died. Did you ever hear that story? George Washington, why did he die? Here's what I heard. I don't know if it's true. I read it someplace, he was sick, very ill, very ill. And the doctor said, well, if you're ill and you're not getting better, you must have some bad blood. Okay. And so they allegedly put leeches on him. And
leeches? Yeah,
and it did not do the trick. He was still sick. So somebody said, well, let's just drain a lot of blood out of him. And they did, and he died. You get the idea?
Wow.
Now, that was medicine. I don't know when he died, probably late 1700s, right? And so, it isn't just economists who don't know, but think they know. Maybe everything is like that. We don't know that.
Yeah. I didn't mean to make it sound like I think economists are the only folks who are dealing with a problem where they have a lot of ignorance. I think it kind of goes around to every science almost, and I think that's why we call it a science in the first place, because we know that our human fallibility is immense and it affects all of what we do. So we have to call it a science when we're sure that we're really trying to get around our human error.
Yeah.
So hence the idea of facts, like versus opinions. Like we have two words for those, and shouldn't opinions and facts be the same? And they're not. That's why you have two words for it. And that's fascinating to me that we think it's okay to even like have to normalize that. Like, this is just my opinion, and here's what I'm gonna say. But isn't that basically saying this is not a fact because it's only a mild theory that I'm still not sure about? Like,
no, you're absolutely right. When people argue, they never say this is my opinion. Well, they rarely say this is my opinion, and that's all it is. It's just an opinion.
Oh yeah. Kind of tracking a little bit back to your work and your career through economics. Now, 52 years is quite a lot of time, and I know you have a lot to show for it because I saw your resume. And I was curious, what has been your biggest challenge in your profession?
Wow. Well, the biggest challenge is getting it published.
Oh.
It's a challenge to work on things, and I have worked on projects that I couldn't figure out. About a dozen years ago, I decided I was going to try to solve a major puzzle in international finance that's been around since the early 80s.
Oh.
I think you know it as the Fama, F-A-M-A puzzle.
Fama Puzzle.
Yeah, and I worked on it for a while, and then I invited one of my colleagues at Miami to work on it with me, and he did. And then we invited somebody from University of Houston to join us, and we didn't solve the puzzle. In a dozen years. But that's sort of like stimulating and fun and challenging. It's frustrating when you write a scholarly paper and send it someplace to get published, and they keep it for a year, and then they send it back, and they just like rip it to shreds. Then don't ever get at the essence of the idea.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's not just me. Everybody has experienced that. Somebody wrote an article some time ago where they interviewed Nobel Prize winners, and they asked them, your most important piece of research, the one that gave you the Nobel Prize, in essence. Tell us about it. And about half of them said they had a terrible time getting it published. You see, because it's something new and different.
Yeah.
And the people who are refereeing the scholarly papers are people who have published in that subject. And if they've published in that subject, then they didn't do the new and different. You understand?
I see.
And so I'm sure that they're not consciously saying to themselves, well, I'm going to reject this.
Yeah.
But they pick it apart.
I see.
And again, many scholars in economics that I know agree with me. I don't know about other fields. It's probably the same.
Yeah. Sorry, this is totally a side thing. Would you mind grabbing the green part of the mic and just tilting it that way?
This way?
Yeah. So because the camera is looking at the opposite. There you go. That's I think that's perfect.
Is that better? You see me better?
Yeah, better. Thank you. Appreciate it. But I was gonna ask. So when they pick it apart, how much of that picking apart do you think is them basically going, do you feel like any of that is some level of laziness in the sense that, actually, I'm sorry, I'll preface the question this way. It seems to me that in order to take a new idea that somebody has published an article, is trying to get something published about, the new idea has to then be simultaneously researched by the people who are supposed to approve it. Right, they have to do the research themselves, don't they?
No, they just have to decide if what you're saying is a worthwhile contribution.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So what if you are coming up with what if you have collected data and have did some calculations yourself and then and you're trying to get that published? Don't the people who have to approve of that? Don't they have to do the same calculations and data work?
They do not have to replicate your results, no, but they have to carefully examine what you did to see if you did it correctly.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So I guess in some sense they do the work, but they do the work by basically shadowing you through your paper.
Yes.
I see. Okay, and I see, and they pick it apart. So the frustration comes from just it being like it's just being very difficult to get it right. It's not so much like there's no like oligarchy. There's no like ego where they purposefully reject it or anything.
No,
right?
There's no big boss.
Okay. Yeah.
The editor of each scholarly journal is the boss of that journal, and they usually trust the judgment of the one or two professors that referee your paper. But it's really stimulating to do economic research and think deeply. It's really fun.
Wow,
yeah.
That's awesome. That's good to hear.
But not as much fun as teaching class.
I see. Yeah. What about teaching class? Do you enjoy so much?
Oh wow. Let's see. First, I'll tell you how much I enjoy teaching class.
Yeah.
Right? If I have a headache before I walk into class, the headache almost always is gone when class is over.
Nice.
If I feel sick, like I'm coming down with something, the same thing happens. I teach the class, and if the class went well, I feel much better. I know students who say, "Yeah, we get the headache," after they hear me teaching.
It's like they exercise it out of you by accident. It's not in them demon.
And let's see, I don't know. I never thought about why I enjoy it. To me, there's nothing more enjoyable that I do than teaching students who really want to learn. It's such a pleasure to teach them only want to learn. And I can't tell you why. I don't know.
Yeah.
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 Anybody who has children, and you taught them, when they were 1, 2, 3 years old, and you taught them about everything they learned, I think you remember that gave you great pleasure. Yeah. And it's the same feeling, but I don't know why.
Yeah. This is a very random way for me to respond to that, I know, but I have a random theory. There's zero backup on this, but I'm just thinking in an evolutionary sense, possibly the human species is interconnected in some ways, and from like one person to another, for one generation to be able to pass on knowledge, valuable knowledge, to the next generation, or just from one person of the same generation to pass on to another person of the same generation. Perhaps there's reward systems that evolution built into us that reward us for exchanging knowledge that's actually valuable.
Because it keeps the human race going.
Yes, yeah, for sure. That it's just a theory in my head, but it seems logical.
That's good insight. Our DNA are arranged that way, right?
Yeah. I think survival probably headed that way, or wanted it that way. Okay. Publishing. Yeah. In terms of solving puzzles like the Fama Puzzle, in terms of solving problems in macroeconomics, what do you find that has been most difficult for you, and what do you find that is probably most difficult in general for economists?
Well, I haven't solved any major macroeconomic problems. Okay. And by the way, that's a plus if I'm going to write a book, and I am, I hope, that talks about macroeconomics, because I don't have a dog in the fight, if you know the expression. I don't have a theory that made me famous, or that I have to defend. But understanding the Great Depression was a major, major project for the profession. And like I said a few moments ago, here, I just have to get specific, okay?
Yeah.
One of the things the government did during the Great Depression, early years, Herbert Hoover did this, was he increased taxes. The logic was this: people were getting laid off, and they have no income, so they're not paying any tax. Firms aren't making a profit, so they're not paying any tax. And the government ran a budget deficit like we had now. It was taking in less tax revenue than what it was spending. And President Hoover was advised that people were losing faith in the government because the government has a deficit. And, nobody has much faith in a business that has a deficit. Yeah. And so they convinced him that taxes should be increased to balance the budget. And he did that. Well, that's absolutely the worst. That's like draining blood out of George Washington. Okay. Because stop and think for a moment. Part of the reason we have a Great Depression is that people aren't buying enough. And that's why the firms shut down, and the workers get laid off. And then they don't buy anything, and it's like a big negative snowball. And what you want to do, if you're the government, is to take steps to get the people to buy more. And raising their taxes is exactly the opposite. They buy less because they have a smaller take-home pay. That's just one, okay, of many things. And so figuring that out, it consumed an awful lot of economic activity for about 30, 40 years. And a Nobel Prize winner from Chicago named Robert Lucas, whom I had the privilege of working with at Carnegie Mellon, said, I think 20 or so more years ago, you know what, it's time we move on to something else. He said, I think the biggest problem in the world is, why are there so many poor nations? Like they're close to 100 relatively poor nations, 100 more or less poor nations, okay? 30 or 40 that aren't poor, 10 or 20 that are rich. And so, but what he said has stimulated some research along those lines, like why do we have poor nations and rich nations? But it still is not, the problem is not solved.
I'm assuming this question of why do we have poor nations and rich nations, this wasn't the kind of concern of like, oh, hey, there's poor nations and that's sad and we should help them. I'm assuming this was more of a question like what are the forces that make a poor nation and what are the forces that make a rich nation?
What makes a poor nation poor and why don't they grow? That's right. That's right.
I see. I see.
And we have a lot of good ideas now. Whether we know them or not, I mean, whether they're everything, we fully understand it, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. So, do you think you could describe like one or two of those ideas?
Let's see. One of them is you have to have property rights. What does that mean? I'll give you an example from the Soviet Union when it collapsed. Okay, when the Soviet Union collapsed, remember the Berlin Wall came down in 1989, and then the Soviet Union collapsed. And within a few years, they decided to go capitalist. Everybody can have their own business, and that seems to work. Look at the United States and Europe. Well, the first person who opened up a store that sold Levi jeans allegedly got rich. Okay, but then other people came into that same time wanting to sell Levi jeans, and either the first owner killed the new entrants, or the new entrants killed the first owner.
Meaning,
literally killed
business
them.
killed, or physically killed, like
boom, boom. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
The economy for a while was like drug dealers in America. If you're a drug dealer in America, allegedly, if somebody comes into your territory, you take care of them. Okay.
Yeah.
Or maybe they'll take care of you.
Yeah.
And so we need law and order and property rights. I know of a group of people in Mexico who had a church that they organized, and the minister was a very young man in his early 20s, and they gradually saved up enough money to buy a lot out in the country someplace, and they got enough money to build a cement block church. Okay, just a cement block plain church. Eventually they were arrested because somebody else wanted that land, and they had a title to it. The church had a title too, and the judge said, well, that's a fake title. And the particular, I know these people personally, the man who was the minister, he escaped, and he's living in Texas now. And, the government took that property.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So the judge that said this...
You have to have law and order, rules, law, that's for sure. Okay.
So then I guess around the first time when property rights were going into effect, so I pardon my uneducated way of wording this, but I don't know how else to word it. But sometime after the property rights thing went into effect, it seems that not every other thing was online yet. Meaning, like there weren't rules intact, there weren't rules in place to protect people, which is interesting. It's as if like we were in a hurry. Like let's get this going, and we'll cross those other bridges when we get there.
Yeah. By the way, you need property rights for capitalism to work. Okay. Like in China, they don't have property rights. Well, they don't own land. The government owns all the land, and China has grown remarkably, but that's because it's a socialist communist country. Okay. But a capitalist country, we want people to work like crazy to be successful, and they have to have the confidence that if they do make money and have a nice life, that the government can't somehow take it all away from them.
Cannot.
In capitalism. That's right.
I see.
That's one. This is not my field of expertise. Okay.
Sorry if you don't mind kind of staying close.
Yeah.
Or moving it towards you. It's fine.
Like this?
Yeah. As long. Well, you've been finding just lately. You've just kind of been venturing away from it.
Oh, more and more and more.
Yeah, just gradually. Yeah.
I see.
You can move it with you.
Yeah. There are, I'm sure, many things that I don't know about this topic.
Sure. Yeah. Which is a statement I wish we all said more. Okay, yeah. So property rights keeps
and law and order.
Law and order and property rights keeps a capitalistic system, among other things, more intact. And
it's like this: it's a necessary but not sufficient condition. If you don't have it, your capitalism won't work.
I see.
But you need other things too.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. So if China doesn't have, if China is not, China is capitalism, but it's or is it not capitalism? I'm sorry.
at the retail level, the stores,
Mm-hmm.
almost all the stores are capitalism. The people own the stores, and they make profit.
Yeah.
Okay, that's like right at the retail level. The people who, but many, if not, I don't know the percentage, huge percent of the factories are owned by the government, or they are half owned by the government and half owned by a business from Japan, the United States, or Europe. Okay, joint ventures. So at the retail level, they're very capitalistic. Okay, and at the production level, factories level, manufacturing level, they are much less capitalism.
I see.
And China has gone in for 30, 40 years. They had this program where they would join, it's called a joint venture, they would join with a firm from usually Japan, the United States, or Europe. And they would own half the factory, and the foreign Japanese, American, or European companies would own the other half of the factory. And the arrangement was that the Japanese, American, or Europeans would run the plant but teach the Chinese how to run it. And there was always an agreement in writing that after so many years, I think it was 30 years, China could buy the other half of the factory, and they own it completely, the Chinese government. And it worked.
Oh, okay.
It worked.
Huh. Do you think that there's any truth to the theory of if a totalitarian government that's very informed scientifically and other ways, who had like the right ideas, could they make sure that an economy doesn't fail versus letting it kind of run on its own, like a democratic country with capitalism, where there's property rights. People make their free choices as long as all the rules are properly tweaked. The people still make their own choices, and people. So if somebody wants to like crash their business into the ground and do something else or whatever, there's all these threats because the system is kind of loosely operating under rules, under structure, but it's still loosely operating. Do you think a totalitarian government has any way of a better way of handling that sort of potential clusterfuck, if you will? Pardon my friend.
Okay, first I'll give you a short answer. I don't know. And then I'll give you a conjecture. Okay. Here's a fact that I know. They have, if not hundreds, many hundreds of 30-story high buildings that were meant to be condos. Okay, people were getting rich on condos 20 years ago in China.
Oh, China.
Okay, now I don't know who built them, but I think the government either built them or the government financed them. Okay, and it created a lot of jobs. Well, they are unsold. Nobody. And when I taught in China 2 different summers, and we would go on tours, you would see maybe 20 or 30 of these, and they were all 30 stories high buildings, like a whole city, and nobody lived in them.
Oh.
And so can something like that cause the economy to turn down? I would assume so, possibly. Okay, but I don't know if a totalitarian government, if they could keep the economy from going down. They could pay the firms to not lay workers off.
I see.
But eventually, again, I don't know.
I see. So all the pieces are still loose, no matter how much control the government assumes.
Well, maybe they're not. Maybe I just don't know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, good point. Okay. Yeah. So I know that the listeners, including myself, would have no way of like really fathoming the answer to this question, but maybe perhaps like a brief dumbed down summary that maybe you could give for what the Fama Puzzle is.
The Fama Puzzle is it's a little technicality, but here's how it works. In summary, we have theories in textbooks, international economics textbooks, that say that when interest rates in our country or another country move, it'll affect the exchange rate. Okay? And I'll just give you a summary. If our interest rates go up in a hurry compared to European rates, money will flow into America because people there will be buying our bonds and putting money in our banks because we have high interest rates. And that'll make the dollar go up in value. Okay? And the theory is it will go up too much. That's the theory. Okay, it will go up too much. The enthusiasm or whatever will bring more dollars in, and it'll drive the dollar's exchange rate value up more than it should. And then eventually the dollar will go down a little bit. Okay? All right, that's the theory. The puzzle is it doesn't go down. It keeps going up. At least it goes up for a couple of years.
Let's see.
And before it starts down, and that's a puzzle. It doesn't make sense. Okay?
So, I'm sorry to interrupt, but so a little bit of raising of interest rates will cause exchange rates to change, and because of that, the interest rates will unwantedly, that's not a word, but unwantedly go up even further beyond what we, no.
Now, suppose our interest rates overnight, this would never happen, jumped up 5 percentage points. Whoa, okay?
Yeah.
All the people with big money around the world would quickly putting money in our banks to earn high interest and buying corporate and government bonds to get high interest. Okay, and that money coming in would drive up the dollar's value, exchange rate value. Okay, it would take more euros to buy a dollar. Okay, because everybody's buying dollars to get their money in our country. And the Fama Puzzle is this. Okay, the theory says after that initial inflow of all those dollars, the dollar it's going to cause the dollar to over appreciate, go up more than it should. And then it should go back down a little bit. And this should happen within a few months. That's the theory. It's in all the books. It's called uncovered interest parity theory. We spend about an hour on it in an international economics course.
Wow.
And it doesn't work that way. What happens is that the dollar continues to go up for a year or two. And that doesn't make sense because if everybody knew the dollar was going to go up for a year or two, there would be even more money coming in.
Yeah.
Okay. And, let's see. A woman that I once knew very well said, who would be better off in the world, Norman, if you figured this out? Okay. And I said, truthfully, I don't know. Okay. Truthfully, I don't know. It's a little technical thing. There have been over 100 papers written to try to solve this puzzle. Okay. And so she said, well, why do you do this then? And I said, well, if there's something that we think we know and the world tells us what we know is backwards, it's just very challenging for a scholar to figure it out.
Yeah.
And maybe someday there'll be a gain to the world. I'll bet who was it? Thomas Edison figured out electricity, right? Yeah.
Which one?
Thomas Edison. He
figured out the what?
Electricity.
Yeah.
So. Maybe his wife said, well, how's that going to make anybody better off?
Yeah.
Yeah. And at that point, perhaps he didn't have an answer.
That's a good point.
But, there's a lot of scholarly research that's done, and maybe this is part of it, I don't know. But there's a lot of scholarly research that's done that we laugh at. I have a niece who's a very bright girl, got a PhD at a good university in California. And her doctoral dissertation was how, I'm trying to think, it was some type of birds communicate with each other. That was her dissertation.
Huh.
Yeah.
This is economics.
Not economics, no.
Oh, okay.
It was not economic. How, I don't know if it was quail or something, I'll just pretend. She studied for a year on how quail communicate with each other.
Huh.
I don't know if that makes anybody better off.
Well,
she's a very smart woman now.
Okay. Yeah, I think I almost have to say that I'm assuming all knowledge eventually, sooner or later, makes somebody better off. I think Neil deGrasse Tyson. Are you familiar with Neil deGrasse Tyson, the astrophysicist?
Copernicus?
Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's currently one of the most popular astrophysicists. Well, he spends a lot of time in the media, educating people. and he's kind of a star in some sense, just because astrophysics and astronomy is kind of becoming a really popular thing, among multiple generations of people. But he was just saying basically that people often ask him this question of like, why do all this research about space? Why spend all this money on going out into space and messing around out there? And his answer was, I'm paraphrasing the heck out of this, but his answer was that it's not that we know that what we're going to find in space will directly help us down here, but what tends to happen is that many of the discoveries that we have discovered out there are totally indirectly, but very much helping our technological advancements. Like, I think the X-ray machine would have not been invented have they not incorporated or had to figure out how to view further into space past the things that X-ray can look past. So it's a bunch of clouds out in space that we can't look past with some X-ray technology incorporated into the Hubble Space Telescope or some other telescope. We could see past that, and then we started using it for humans to look into their chests and look into their bodies. So, well,
remember, I'm a scholar. At least I think I'm a scholar, and I'm all for research about anything we don't understand.
Yeah. So I would assume most of any knowledge helps us. Plus, I don't think we can predict what knowledge is going to help us how, since we don't have the knowledge to predict it all.
No, you're right. And it would be naive to think that all research and all discoveries will help mankind.
Yeah.
Okay. It's also naive to think that it won't ever help.
Yeah. I guess just we don't know if it's helping now or like too late or something. So you mentioned that there is something that you were working on currently that you feel like will probably never be expected or accepted by economists, because they might find that your audacity for assuming you can help or solve the problem is insulting to them or something like that.
Yeah, well, see, it's presumptuous to say I'm going to write a book.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I hope to write a book, and I hope to get it published.
Yeah.
Okay. I've been working about a year now, and in previous books that I've written, they were all three-year projects before the publisher took them, and then the publisher takes a year to turn your manuscript into a book. Okay, so I'm 1 year into a project. And it's tied up with something I said earlier and broader. Okay, one hot topic is, will robots and artificial intelligence eventually take all jobs? Okay,
I was going to ask you that too.
All right, and 200 years ago, people said, well, will assembly line machines take all jobs? And but that's also the logic is here. A robot can do what 5 men can do. An industrial robot, they look like crabs. You ever see the pictures of them?
Yeah.
Okay, they can do what 5, 6, 7, 8 people can do. And the answer to that is, well, yeah, but somebody has to push the button to start the robot. Somebody has to oil it and maintain it, and somebody has to build it. Okay, and there's also going to be people doing research to make better robots. And so that's why we don't have a lot of people unemployed now. Okay. Well, see, I think it goes much farther than that. But let's go back. That statement that one robot takes the job of many workers, and therefore someday we won't have any jobs. Yeah. That's similar to a Mexican takes the job of an American worker. Yeah. And it's the same logic that a woman takes a job a man has. Okay. Well, let's go back to the robots. Okay. People have figured out what I just told you, and it's in many books. Okay. That we need somebody to build the robots. Yeah. Okay. But they don't go far enough. What they're doing is sort of like microeconomics, not looking at the whole economy at once.
The people who say that?
No, I say that.
No, I'm saying the people who say that
the robots don't take away jobs because we need people to build the robots. Yeah. Those people tend to be microeconomists. They call themselves labor economists, and they're absolutely right. Okay, but it's much broader than that. the people who build the robots will need, let's pretend that they need steel and they need plastic and they need rubber. Let's just pretend. Well, so it goes back further, right? We have jobs for people making the plastic and the steel and the rubber. But then all those jobs that were created building the robots and discovering how, and working on how, those people get incomes.
Yeah.
And therefore they buy more. They buy more of everything. Okay? Pizza and beer and sending their students to Miami. Okay?
Yeah.
And then it multiplies. It goes over and over again. Because if they're buying more pizza and beer, then that creates jobs in the pizza and beer industry, okay? And that creates jobs for whoever makes what we need to make pizza and beer, okay? And that's why I think that we really don't fully understand it.
Yeah.
And that's why we have one of the lowest unemployment rates we've ever had now. And we still have, and we have all these industrial robots and all the machines and the computers. People said 30 years ago, computers were going to take away all jobs too, or at least a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
And they did. They did take away some jobs, but you know the proof of the pudding is in the eating.
Yeah,
and our unemployment rate is like on average at about a 50-year low, and it's way down. I mean, it's great.
Yeah,
okay.
That's awesome. So devil's advocate question: wouldn't there be people that you would assume might be like, that's not true because the unemployment is not down because of these and these other statistics, or is this pretty generally accepted today that unemployment is down?
Unemployment is down now. I think it's 3.8% right now. It changes every month. That's very low. Okay, that's still a lot of people.
Yeah.
We have about 150 million people in our labor force.
Yeah.
Right. And so 3.6% of 100 million be 3,600,000. So we're talking about 5 million people unemployed. That's not I mean, that's a small percent, but that's still a lot of people that are hurting, if you understand. By the way, all these robots and computers and everything, they're taking away some jobs, but we create other jobs. But what it's doing is it's taking away the jobs that middle-class people typically would have. And we have the people on top, the engineers who are building the robots, and the technicians who are repairing them. They make good income too, I'm sure. But you know, in that economy, there's been an increase in the share of workers who do simply unskilled labor, like taking care of older people or cleaning houses or whatever like that. And there's been a decrease in people who do jobs that a computer could do. Okay, and that is a problem. And many people think those were the people who elected President Trump. Not just those. Okay, and most Republicans voted for Trump, and then those Democrats or people with no party affiliation who felt left behind, most of them have jobs. They just don't pay as well as they would like. Yeah.
There is, I almost said trending, but it's not trending. It's a complex, slightly charged topic, but it's also just a it's also a simple, like, reaction. This phrase "learn to code," I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's been uttered from the intention of insulting people. It's also been uttered with the intention of, no, actually, literally just learn to code and you'll have a new job.
That's right.
But then much of the argument against that is how can you expect people, 40, 50, 60 years old to just learn to code all of a sudden who have never had experiences with computers? And I guess I could ask you that question, what you think of that, but at the same time, I'm also wondering if that idea, learn to code, to just change what your profession is, if that's going to, and maybe that's what's speeding up this need to change professions, because I'm assuming perhaps, maybe you can confirm, I don't know if you have the expertise or have the knowledge on this or not, but perhaps the professions, like people could last longer in one profession, 50 years ago or 100 years ago, people could last in that profession longer because the economy had a demand for it for longer, as opposed to now with all the change being rapidly amped up, like change is happening faster. And so I'm assuming that new jobs are being created, but those new jobs will be faster out of demand than before. So this in demand and out of demand flipping situation is happening faster and faster.
Oh, see, that's a really good idea, and you're right on about technological advances are occurring faster than ever. Okay. I have read where there are more people doing research now in the world than all the people who ever did research throughout history.
Research in all topics? Or
Yeah, all topics. Yeah, they're more doing it this year than all the people who are they're dead now. Okay, throughout history who have done research, and you know, the number of patents that we get are incredible compared to what they were in the past. And you're right. Having progress, technological progress, computers, robots, whatever, any new advance in technology harms some workers for a while. Look what the automobile did to blacksmiths and carriage makers. You understand? That's a good example. But if the technological change occurs slowly, then people have a chance to get assimilated into the economy more. You know, I'll just make up some numbers. We have 150 million people in our workforce. If advances in technology caused 50 or 100,000 of them to lose their job every year, we could get them assimilated because that's a trivial percent of 150 million jobs that we have.
Yeah.
But if technological progress or imports, same idea with imports. Imports are good unless they come in too fast, too much all of a sudden. And we have millions of workers being displaced. They can't be assimilated. Yeah. And you're right about. See, I grew up in a blue collar family. My dad worked in a factory. Okay, and all my cousins and aunts and uncles who worked, they all worked in factories or things like that. And in the town where I lived, imports caused 7 glass factories to go bankrupt in a period of about 10 years. And I saw the harm it did to uncles who were in their late 50s who had a decent job in a factory. Adjusting for inflation, they were making $40,000 a year. It wasn't that much a long time ago. Okay? And it devastated their lives. Okay, and you really can't expect say a 58-year-old man with a high school degree to go out and learn some high-tech kind of knowledge. Okay, and so that's a problem. Yeah. And see, for those people out there who were like me, the way I was, okay, I felt sorry for my uncles and aunts, but I thought, well, in every game there are winners and losers, okay, you know, and I feel sorry for the teams that lose their basketball game and go home, but that's just life. Well, I feel a little bit differently now. These are real people, and their lives matter, and we have to do something. I don't know. I don't have a solution, and I'm not the one who thought of this. I have read it many times in the last year or two, because I want to write a book on it. If we don't do something for those people who are left behind by rapid technological advance, they will be a political force that will elect presidents who will slow down the political advance.
A political advance?
Yeah, or imports. You know,
I see.
Imports and technological advance. I said political.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, imports and technological advance are in the same, I don't know, they're similar.
Stream.
Yeah, they're similar. They're both good.
Yeah.
But not too fast.
Yeah, interesting. That's fascinating.
And so, and that's right. You know, you can say, well, you know, there are winners and losers from all this, and the losers are just losers, tough luck. No, in a democracy, the losers will do something to get people elected so that the progress won't be as fast, and we won't have as many imports. And therefore, wouldn't it be better if we helped them somehow? Yeah,
that is fascinating. And, you know, it's hard not to get sentimental in the topic like this because, you know, it's like, well, let's allow technology to advance. Look at the things we're doing medically, and look at the things we're doing in all these other areas. At the same time, I also agreed that the most important thing is so that people can survive and take care of their families and take care of themselves. And if the advancement means there being new professions that people are finding it harder and harder to get trained for and to be qualified for, and people are getting left behind. Too many people are getting left behind. That is a real problem, not the kind of like I get this feeling like politically there is the side that says so I'll just use the example of coal jobs. It's like people saying, stop bitching about all the coal jobs being gone. We don't need coal anymore. We're advancing. We're a really intelligent species, and we're past coal. We're done with that now. And it's true that we're done with that, I guess. But at the same time, it's the lack of sympathy in their tone that I miss, and which is one of the reasons I have a hard time feeling associated with any group.
Also, it ruins their lives, some of the workers.
Yeah,
and then it ruins the whole town.
Mm-hmm.
And you see, because let's go back to my hometown. 7 glass factories. Everybody in town's working. Mm-hmm. You could drop out of high school and get a job there. Okay, mm-hmm. There's all the openings.
Yeah.
It was hard work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the town pharmacy was called the Glass City Pharmacy. The town bank, there was one, was called the Glass City Bank. You get the idea? The whole town ran around the incomes and the spending of the workers who worked in these glass factories.
Mm. Wow.
Okay, so the glass factories all shut down. A lot of people left.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but the pharmacy closed, and the bank closed, and half the stores closed. I call that black magic, although we understand it a little bit.
Yeah.
When change takes place too fast and it's concentrated in a geographic area, it just wipes people out. And you know what? In America, you know the expression "Black Lives Count," right?
Black Lives Matter. Yeah.
Well, you know what? Unemployed workers matter.
Yeah, and that's among all demographics. Doesn't matter what your ethnicity is.
Right. And I don't know the solution, but I know one that I've read that I haven't found a flaw in,
mm-hmm.
and that is, see, you just don't want to pay people to not work, and we do that. We pay people to not work. Welfare. Okay, we pay them to have children. And, okay.
Well, it seems to be kind of the. It could be looked through that lens. I agree with you in that sense.
Okay. And we have something called the Earned Income Tax Credit. Most people don't even know about it because they're not poor.
Mm-hmm.
If you have several children and you're married and you make about $15,000 or $20,000 a year, that's not enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
The government, in essence, will give you back most of the income tax you paid.
Yeah.
But once you get to $30,000 a year, you don't get any money back. And if you have no children, you don't get any money back at a low income. That's a good idea because people gain only if they're working. All right? Sorry. But the plan is this. If we think people should make $15 an hour, $15 an hour, by the way, is about $31,000 a year.
Per...
For if you work full time, 40 hours a week.
Oh, for one person.
Yeah, for one person. Okay, and you can live on that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you get a job that pays $10 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
The government should give you half the difference between. They should give you $250 an hour. That would still give you incentive to get a better job because your income would always go up.
Mm-hmm.
It would also give firms incentive to hire you because they're going to get you a little more cheaply.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just one idea. Maybe there's some more ideas out there.
Sure.
But we need to help these people.
Yeah, for sure.
And just paying them to not work is not a good idea.
Like in terms of like having observed the system through your career, you have noticed that it just doesn't work. I'm assuming is that this is.
Yeah, and it's bad for the people too. You know, like there is
like short term, long term.
You know, there's a good feeling if you work, and if you don't work, there is I'm sure inside a disgrace.
Almost like a built-in thing, like a genetically
self-respect or something like that. And by the way, the economic theories that we have don't take that into account. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have people working. But if you get the minimum wage, you can't. One person can barely survive on a minimum wage.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like $18,000 a year, and the poverty line for one person is $16,000. And if you have a family, you can't make it.
Yeah, I do think. Yeah, I think I like this statement. We need to get people to work, but that statement alone, out of context, sounds a certain way. But I think if we just assume the context of psychological context, such as, like you were mentioning, the internal built-in reward systems we have for the results of our hard work. Like if you work hard, and you'll see the result of that. You internally feel like, I can just say that because I'm a human being, and there are things I've worked hard for. There are things I didn't work hard for. There are times when I was really lazy, and then times that I was the most comfortable and lazy, I ended up being fairly unhappy, which is a paradox to me, because it's like, I thought comfort was the pinnacle of life's greatness or whatever. But that was when I was way younger, and I'm noticing that hard work, and then seeing the result of that, there's this sort of like grinding away the gears of my mind and body. So I can see that I'm taking a little damage, because all things wear and tear. But it's as if I don't feel really alive unless I'm wearing tearing, and I don't feel really happy unless I'm wearing and tearing away in a way that is fulfilling and meaningful to me. So I think people need to work, but I think they also need to work jobs that they find meaningful, and jobs that they like and enjoy. Because you're an economist now, and you teach this in college. But if you didn't find fulfillment and meaning, and you didn't get this joy, and your headache didn't go away when you went into class, and taught people, then that would be wear and tear. But I feel like that wear and tear would compound in ways that it doesn't now, because you're enjoying yourself. So it's like you see the result of your hard work, So, I do think people need to work, but we do need to find ways to not treat people like robots, which I guess is why we're getting robots to do their jobs. But this does kind of make me bring up this next topic. It's not really a next topic, it's actually connected into it real seamlessly. You were mentioning, how do we correct for the problem of too rapid of a change technologically and politically and other ways, if people have a hard time keeping up with this change because they're out of the job jobs too often. I'm pretty sure I'm factual on this, but in case I'm not, I just prefaced it just now, or disclaimer. There's a candidate running for president in 2020, Andrew Yang, and he is running, I think one of his main things, if not his main thing, is universal basic income. He wants to do that, and he was on a very famous podcast describing how the numbers would line up. This is him saying. He said the numbers would line up. It would create incentive for people to put their money back into the market, because people wouldn't just sit on the monthly money that they get. They would spend it either on rent or on pleasure, which all costs money, assuming that your pleasures cost money, unless you're climbing a tree, which I like to do. That doesn't cost anything, but property costs something, I guess. But so what are your thoughts on universal basic income?
Universal basic income. I don't like it, because you're paying people to not work. Although if they work, they still get the money. I know that. Okay. Mm-hmm. I would rather use that money to subsidize their income when they work. Mm. I would.
Subsidize meaning like add to it?
Yeah, like what I said about 5 minutes ago. Yeah. By the way, that plan to subsidize the wage rates, that would help people find jobs that are meaningful, you see, because if the job that you find meaningful to you mm-hmm. has a very low wage rate, say $8 an hour mm-hmm. instead of $10 an hour, it won't cost you that much, because the government would pay half the difference between $8 and $15, which would give you $11.50 an hour. Okay, and if you got a job for $10 an hour, then when the government pays you half the difference between $10 and $15, you'd have a salary of $12.50 an hour. But that particular plan, it gives people more freedom to choose. Oh, by the way, I don't think that we should let anybody starve. Okay, right. like homeless people. I feel so sorry for them. My church, by the way, once a month we go down to Over the Rhine.
Okay.
And and it's called a soup kitchen, but we feed people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when you see these people walking in the frigid cold winter, and they're living outside, and you can tell, it makes you want to cry.
Mm-hmm.
It really makes you want to cry.
Mm-hmm.
I know some people in Cincinnati, minorities, they can't work. They have injuries, they can't work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And they're on disability, and they get enough to live. It's real poverty. But again, I don't think that we should ever. There should be money for everybody if they can't work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But we have to create incentives to work.
Yeah. That has been. I'm not the first podcast to bring this into discussion, and much of what I've listened to and much of what I heard of, this seems to be a topic riddled with tiny paradoxes. It's like, how do you incentivize labor, and at the same time, how do you not incentivize laziness? And I guess it seems to lead back oftentimes to just people's freedom of choice. I don't think it leads back to it. I just think that comes up as a question, people have freedom of choice, so they can always find a loophole if they want to, and we are smart enough to find the loopholes. And I think people will continue to exploit loopholes every chance they get, because comfort is the first choice and hard work is not the first choice. But that makes me wonder about culture. I'm sorry, I'm randomly now doing a stream of thought thing here, but makes me think of would it be better if we just inherently had a culture where we, even within family, even among peers, we valued and socially rewarded harder work. Like somebody was like, hey, check out this song I made, and instead of saying, oh, great job, that's such a good song, when it's not a good song. If they think it's not a good song and you are the friend of that person, just be like, I'm sorry, it's not that good. I love you, but it's not that good. You should work harder on that, because there's these pieces that I can tell you didn't spend that much time on. How much did you work? One day. That's not, a song doesn't consist of one day of thinking, and random example. But I was gonna, it's just a little bit of devil's advocacy here. You mentioned that you don't like the idea of universal basic income, and then you mentioned the idea of having the government kind of supplement some income. And isn't that basically the same thing as universal basic income, except proportioned out?
No, you have to be working to get the money.
Big point, yeah. Well, okay.
And I want to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I think it would be a sin for
so could you
my doctor. Yeah, I think it would be not a sin, wrong, stupid. If my doctor, medical doctor, who's
Mm-hmm.
a good man that I know, and an attorney that I know, and me as
Mm-hmm.
a professor,
Mm-hmm.
for the government to pay us $10,000 a year as universal income, okay? There's just something about that just doesn't seem right,
Mm-hmm.
okay? I would rather we do something else. Now, universal income for all the poor people in the world, it destroys incentives.
Mm.
But again, we should give money to people who can't work.
Yeah.
And it's hard to determine. We're going to have cheaters, of course. We're going to have cheaters.
Yeah.
Okay. But we should help people who can't work. And there should be decent places for people to live, besides under a tunnel in downtown Cincinnati. Yeah.
Assuming they're not a Zen monk who likes tunnels.
Yeah, and I know some poor people whose sons became unemployed, and they refused to go to the shelters they have in Cincinnati, supposedly because they didn't feel safe there.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they could get things stolen while they were asleep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's hardcore times. So I got a few other ideas. Oh, by the way, we have been going for an hour and 18 minutes. I just figured I'd ask if you would wish to go on or stop, or you want to take a break. I'll keep it going if you want to take a break.
Truthfully, I'm ready to call it quits for today.
Okay.
You're welcome to invite me back again sometime.
I would love to have you back.
Okay.
Cool. I appreciate you coming out. And did you? It is is often the podcasts are often useful to like advertise your if there's anything you're working on that you want people to know about, like a book. I don't know if that any of that is applicable to you.
Well, I said I want to write a book, and it would take me at least a couple of years to finish it, and maybe a year after that to get it published. That's a lot of ifs, right?
Yeah.
But the tentative title for the book, and I've used the terms here, is Economics, Magic and Black Magic.
Nice.
Okay.
Cool. And any of your previously published work, are these mostly found in online academic libraries, or can they be found on Amazon or anything like that? Are they in the marketplace like
you
that?
My previously published works, except for one textbook, are for scholars. It was for professors with PhDs and graduate students. They're not written for the average person. Okay. And I don't make any money out of them, okay, except I get a bigger raise from Miami if I publish a book, okay. And I can tell you the last book I published was about 4 years ago, and they sold 450 copies, and I said to the editor, "Oh, I'm a failure." He said, "No, that's like shooting par if you're a golfer." I said, 450? He said, "Yes." He said, "About 200 universities in the world bought my book." Okay, and he said these are universities where they have PhD students, and he said and about 250 people bought the book, and they were either professors someplace or they were practitioners, like people in banks that handle foreign exchange and transactions like that. And this is nothing that anybody who doesn't have a PhD in economics would ever buy. As a matter of fact, you would also have to specialize in international finance because the lingo, the terminology would be foreign to you.
Yeah. Well, people who are equipped to take the leap and jump into that book, or people who are just interested and maybe qualified, who have some background in this, if they're interested, where would they find this?
You can get it on Amazon, I believe.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure Barnes & Noble will get it for you. Okay.
What's the title of this one?
The last one was... I'm trying to think. Exchange Rate Economics.
I see.
It has a subtitle too, but Exchange Rate Economics by Norman Miller.
Awesome. Cool. All right.
It talks about all. I told you the puzzle.
Fama Puzzle?
Yeah, Fama Puzzle. But in my reading and my work, I discovered about 15 other puzzles. There's much we don't understand, and that's what the book is all about.
15 other puzzles. As hard as Fama Puzzle, or similarly or less harder? Who knows how hard it will become?
Yeah, things we don't understand.
Yeah. Okay. Sweet. Well, I really appreciate you doing this.
Well, thank you for having me here.
For sure. Yeah. There you go. Handshake. All right. Thanks a lot. And that is it for us, folks. See you next time.